the Royal Blue podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the latest Royal Blue podcast. I'm your host Adam Jones and today I'm joined by Dave Prentice and Chris Beesley as we look back at a bit of a frustrating result for Everton at the weekend, a 3-2 loss to Arsenal, but there were a lot of positives to be made from that game. Of course, Andre Gomes came back, another couple of goals for the two strikers as well. But we'll dive straight in, and Preno, I think frustrating was probably the key word for this result.
Yeah, it was a weird one because it was disappointing in the fact that, we defended the way we did and we ended up losing and getting no points. But equally, there were lots of things to be positive about. It was a very positive performance for the last half an hour. You could argue, so Everton were the dominant force and were, taking the game to Arsenal, which we haven't done very often at the Emirates. And we created chances. So that's why it gets so frustrating, because it could have been so much better. And we've got to look at it, I suppose, look at the bigger picture. Carlo Ancelotti has been here 5 minutes. He's basically still getting to know the players that he's got at his disposal. He's still learning about them, and he'll have learned plenty more at the weekend. And we're not going to see any dramatic changes, I think, until he gets players that he wants in the football club, players that he's identified and players that he's targeted. But, from in the short term, it was decent. We created opportunities. We should have done better, but we didn't. So I'm trying to be glass half full here. It was. There were more positives than negatives. All right. It was a 3-2 defeat. It was frustrating. There was a great opportunity to make ground on the European chasing teams. We didn't, but there are still plenty of positives that we can look at. And let's be positive. This is a positive podcast. So don't you dare say anything negative now.
Well, Bees, we were sat down. We were hardly even settled. 50 seconds in, Everton take the lead. What's going through your mind?
89 minutes to cling on. I think because of those positives, I think that's why it is frustrating, because Carlo Ancelotti certainly didn't go in there with the mindset that, Everton can't beat Arsenal, Everton got a terrible record away to Arsenal or all these other teams, like the big four and then became the big six or whatever. But people turn around saying, was that right that the 1-0 win at Man United on Roberto Martinez for season was the last away win at a top six club, team? Mm-hmm. And that's woeful, considering that David Moyes never managed it against what was the top four, as it were, for over 11 years. So that's what was frustrating, because there's not much to choose between Arsenal and Everton at the moment, two mid-table teams with aspirations for more. And like you say, at times during that game, they were the better side. They created so many good opportunities. So again, to come away with nothing from the result, that's what makes it frustrating. Yes, there were a lot of positives going forward and things that you could look at and say that's cause for encouragement, but when it's so close for this chase for Europe, and a lot of the teams around Everton actually picked up points at the weekend, that's what made it more frustrating, really. It
was quite funny, actually, because Kevin Ratcliffe had a little pop, didn't he, on social media at Gary Neville over his overly negative commentary and analysis. And Neville was quite spirited in his reply. He basically said that, look, I want to be positive about Everton genuinely, but I can't, because every time you go to a top six side, you bottle it, basically. And you look at it and you think, he's got a point. Is it 1994, the last time we won at Chelsea? 1996, last time at Arsenal. Correct. Liverpool, let's not go there with that one. And then Old Trafford, that's the one you've just mentioned. That's the only one we've won there.
That's one since 1992.
Exactly. City was always the team under Moyes that for some reason we seem to have a bit of a sign over, but even that seems to have dwindled over the last 5 or 6 years. So, he's got a point. And that will only change in time under Ancelotti. And he's certainly got a very bold sense of purpose, if you like. He's come in and he wants, what's the phrase he uses? Vertical balls, which I couldn't quite get my head around. I'm thinking, does he mean he wants us to lump it in the air? And he doesn't. He means positive penetrating passes, forward passes. And to that end, Andre Gomes' return is instrumental in that, because everything he does is positive looking. And he'll want to, bring in more players of that type, that will play the ball positively. And I think in time under Ancelotti, we will see a much brighter sense of purpose go into these teams. What was it Mr. Moyes said about taking knives to gunfights? So we won't be doing that in future. But you've got to give the fella time, to let those, ideas and those tactics bed in. So in isolation, that statistic looks pretty damning, to be honest. But, hopefully in time under Carlo Ancelotti that will change and improve. there's opportunity for it to improve in the short term, isn't there? With trip to Stamford Bridge looming not too far away. So we'll see.
Well, reading Michael Ball's column yesterday, he seemed to believe that the only way to change this is to finally get that one under your belt, and then hopefully then the rest will tumble. Do you tend to agree with that?
Maybe. I mean, it's got to be a mentality change throughout the club. Because, we have had that one, when Brian Oviedo leathered it in, sort of down at the scoreboard end at Old Trafford. But that didn't suddenly, translate then into regular victories at top 6 clubs. It needs like a sea change in the entire football club. And we spoke about this last week, talked about the sense of fatalism that tends to envelop Evertonians. And that's been inbred because, we've been knocked on the head so many times over the last 20 odd years. Just when things start to look like they're moving in the right direction, we suffer a setback. And so you can understand why there seems to be a sense of fatalism. It's even become a catchphrase, hasn't it? Everton that. We need to get away from that. We need to start being positive all the time and thinking, well, no, so we need to be optimistic. And I don't want to bring him into it, but, it's what Jurgen Klopp did at Liverpool, when he turned doubters into believers. He basically had an entire stadium there full of people that doubted what they were seeing. And he wanted to change that mentality. He changed it on the terraces. He changed it amongst the playing staff. And it's what Carlo Ancelotti has to do at Goodison Park now. And, he's trying to do it with the players, with his, vertical balls and, playing the ball more positively. But we've also got to do it with the support base, try and create this mentality whereby let's go to these places with an optimistic sense of, we could get something rather than, as you just said, oh my God, 89 minutes to defend now. So, it's something that the entire football club has to embrace. And that takes time, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, looking at it as in a most positive way, you can look at those last 30 minutes at the weekend and you can think to yourself, I can't really remember the last time Everton have gone to one of the top 6 teams and played them off the park as well as that. So, Bees, how much do you think, especially going into games now against Manchester United, Chelsea, Liverpool, how much do you think Everton need to take into those games,
Yeah, it shows that they can do it, and they did. There's certainly more than a match for these teams. We saw obviously Chelsea coming up to Goodison for Big Dunk's first game there. Turned them round. Obviously Manchester United were beaten 4-0 at Goodison. So on the day they can beat these type of teams, and I think that's again that going back to why it's frustrating that they're not getting the results that they should be getting. Going back to Dave's point there about the negativity, I don't see how the players can actually suffer from that. You understand that the weather-beaten fans who nevertheless turn up and are really encouraging all the time, they're the ones who have suffered over the years, but it's different generations of players. It's not the same players who have always suffered these results. And like I said before, Carlo Ancelotti certainly won't have an inferiority complex. So I just wonder why the players, this keeps happening to them. We saw it obviously infamously with the FA Cup game at Anfield, that the weight of expectation, the burden of history that the fans are feeling because they haven't won at Anfield for a long time, and ditto Arsenal, be it the Emirates or Highbury, that the players shouldn't be suffering from that. So I just wonder what their problem is in that respect, because, okay, some of them have been there a bit longer than others, but they shouldn't be weighed down from that. But yeah, with the way that they're playing, there's no reason why they can't get points out of that. And again, that's why it was frustrating for me.
I think two players that are becoming increasingly more and more important, especially since Ancelotti took over, is Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison. They were the two men on the score sheet again. It was a bit of a game of two halves for them too. I thought they were pretty clinical in the first half. Calvert-Lewin especially scoring a chance that he had no right to score from that position, really. And then in the second half, we saw a few more missed chances. Do you think that's maybe the thing that's going to come with having young strikers up front? Is it kind of a side effect of that, of their learning process?
Yeah, we need to be patient with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I mean, I've been a big advocate of the qualities that he has. I mean, that run he made down the inside left channel midway through the first half, showed sprinters-like qualities. He holds the ball up well. We've said many times finishing's not a strong point, which sounds like a bit of a negative for a centre-forward, but it's improving. I did actually, I'm ashamed to say, in the second half during Saturday, when he side-footed that one narrowly wide from, so a decent move, I actually said that's the difference between him and Aubameyang. But we're talking about a fella who topped the Premier League goal-scoring charts last season, Aubameyang, a guy that's like been one of Europe's preeminent strikers for several seasons. So maybe a bit harsh there. It's just the frustration of, sort of the moment, sort of capturing you there. The goal he did score was superb, sort of took it so well. at such an early part of the game. And it'll come. I mean, we've said many, many times in here about, how he reminds so many people of Graham Sharp in his stature and the way he holds the ball up and, his aerial abilities. And Sharpie was a real late developer. He was about 23, I think, where he finally broke through into the first team. And he was more a scorer of spectacular goals initially, and then eventually became a great goal scorer as well, rather than a scorer of great goals. And it did take time. And, the coaches at the football club at the time identified the quality and the potential he had, stuck with him, and were then rewarded by a man who became the second highest goal scorer in the club's history. So obviously Calvert-Lewin, they've identified potential, they're sticking with him. And we've just got to be that word I used earlier, patience again, because they're going to be frustrating moments like that one in the second half where you think, just get a firmer touch on that and it's a goal. But the very, very top strikers do that. Let's face it, his goals return this season has been excellent, compared to what we've seen in previous years. So we can't knock him and Richarlison seem to be having this like personal duel, don't they, as to who's going to finish top scorer. So we love everything Richarlison does. And again, tend to lose sight of the fact that he's only 22, is he 23 now? So again, still a very young striker. So they're two youngsters who are only going to improve, as their career progresses. So yeah, we should be showing, patience with them. We should be supporting them and just, willing them to make those necessary improvements to deliver, what we're going to see. And let's face it, given the way the financial fair play situation is with the club at the moment, we can't really be going out and spending 70 and 80 million quid on the finished article, which is what a top striker costs you nowadays. So, yeah, by all means, allow those two players to develop and bring in other players around them that can support them, because they're shouldering the goal-scoring burden on their own at the moment.
Well, that's it. I was about to say, there's no doubting that they're in fantastic form. Under Ancelotti, of the 16 goals that Everton have scored in the league, 11 of them have come from Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison. So my question is, Bees, are Everton a bit too reliant on them?
No, I don't think we should be complaining in that respect. So it's nice for all areas to chip in. But I think the biggest thing about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, as Dave was alluding to, how much it costs to bring somebody else in, was he's actually stopped that conversation now. Everyone was saying, ever since the moment Romelu Lukaku left the club, and replace Lukaku. Everton haven't replaced Lukaku, was then the next thing that they were saying. People aren't saying that anymore. They're looking at other areas of the pitch to improve in the summer, be it on the wings or midfield or in defence, be it right back, centre back, whatever. They're not saying that a centre forward is the top priority anymore, because they've got Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison, and I think a lot of credit has to go to Duncan Ferguson, really, because although Marco Silva was a man who wanted to play 4-3-3, who inevitably ended up playing 4-2-3-1. The difference would be you'd only play one of those typically in the centre forward role. It'd be one or the other. It'd usually be Richarlison out wide, wouldn't it, with Calvert-Lewin down the middle. Sometimes Richarlison would play centre forward. So for Dunk to go old school, as it were, and restore, and it's quite a simple tactic, go 4-4-2, two of them up front. I mean, deserves a lot of credit for that, because he obviously it worked under Duncan Ferguson. Carlo Ancelotti's continued with it. He's not always played with that system himself. I mean, he has played 4-4-2 in the past, but I think he also used the Christmas tree a lot of the time, the 4-3-2-1. So, yeah, he's obviously seen that that's the best way to deploy them. And, yeah, it's, like I said, Yuri Mina's chipped in with a couple of goals of late. And perhaps the area where we'd like to be seeing more is obviously from the midfield, because Gylfi Sigurdsson was joint top scorer with Richarlison last season. That's kind of tailed off. So, yeah, that would be the area you'd like to see more. But I think we should just celebrate the fact that we've got two strikers there at Everton who are both scoring goals.
That's been the biggest disappointment for me this season. And, I'm speaking as an avowed Gylfi Sigurdsson supporter. But for a guy capable of scoring the variety of goals that he scored last season, to just dry up totally. And it's not like he's being unfortunate. Like, he's seeing goalkeepers making great saves or balls pinging back off the woodwork. He just doesn't seem to be getting in the positions anymore. And I know he's been playing as, a central midfielder at times, but that still shouldn't prevent you, certainly with a guy with his, ability to shoot from distance, getting into positions to, at least get shots off on target. I don't quite know what's gone wrong there. Is he finding the change of role too difficult to adjust to? We should be seeing more from him. He's capable of much, much more. And the fact that he isn't means that we're having to rely on Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison. I mean, Bernard even, I know he got one recently, but...
He's now our second top scorer this season in the league with 3.
Really? Oh, that says it all, doesn't it? That's incredible. It's just relying so heavily on, two individuals, and you can't do that. You've got to try and spread the goal scoring burden. You need your defenders to pop up with a handful. You can't rely on defenders, but, certainly Yerry Mina, 3, maybe 4 a season. Fullbacks even, so Seamus Coleman used to score, so 3 or 4 a season, but, I know he's been injured a lot. Sidibe's not really looked like scoring a goal, as he was the one he dinked over the goalkeeper that someone pinched off him on the line. But, we don't see many from the fullbacks. Midfield's dried up almost totally. So, it's placing so much emphasis on the top 2. And other players have got to start showing more responsibility for, grabbing goals.
Well, it was Sigurdsson and Iwobi who were playing as de facto the wingers, really, in the system at the weekend. And I got a fair amount of abuse for my player rating for Gylfi Sigurdsson, because I thought he had a pretty good first half.
What did you give Iwobi, by the way?
I think I gave him a 5. I don't think he did all that much.
Yeah.
Personally, I think Sigurdsson contributed hugely to both the goals, so that's why I gave him a 6. Yeah. Even though I admit his second half performance, he certainly tailed off. Yeah. But I think those are the kind of areas that Everton need to be getting a few more goals in. Bernard was on the bench. Obviously, Everton were missing Theo Walcott at the weekend. Did you maybe think that played a factor?
Well, he would have been an ideal person to have played in a game like that. I said that prior to the match. It wasn't just with, a sense of, told you so afterwards. Just his ability, his pace on the counter. For a team that you expect to dominate possession and take the ball to you, having Richarlison's pace, having his pace. If Moise Kean had to come on, so later in the game, maybe, the pace that he can use could have been so vital. And obviously it was missing. Now, the reason I mentioned Iwobi is that I just sense there's a growing sense of opinion amongst a number of fans that frustrated by him, disappointed by him. And, I don't want to go overboard, so I quite like the fella. And, he's got certain qualities. I think it's a bit harsh, some of the criticism. But he didn't do a great deal at the weekend, so to allay any of that. He linked play reasonably well. He moved the ball quickly. He moved the ball well. But he's like Sigurdsson. He can do a lot more. That was a great opportunity he had, in the inside right channel, where he almost side-footed it. He didn't seem he didn't have the conviction to absolutely drill it. And he's got to do better than that. I mean, he scored early doors against Wolves, and that one in the League Cup away at Lincoln, and we haven't really seen him threaten a goal since. And so, again, he's guilty as charged. He's got to start producing more in front of goal. Likewise, Gylfi Sigurdsson. Sigurdsson has so many other qualities to his game. And, you're right, he did contribute, as he has done in other games this season. And what did Mr. Roberto Martinez call them? Pre-assists, the pass that leads to the pass that leads to the goal. And, so he's done that a fair bit this season. But, now, come on, the pair of them can do a lot better in front of goal. And we need to see more of that.
Well, I personally think Iwobi suffers from a similar problem to Sigurdsson. I think his best position is probably in a 4-5-1. Maybe he's the man in behind the striker, in a position that doesn't really exist under Carlo Ancelotti's system anymore, does it?
No. I spoke to one of our colleagues from Football London at the start of the season when Iwobi was first signed, and he was saying that he's a very unselfish player. Teammates liked him a lot, but he did towards the end. He used to get a lot of stick from the Arsenal crowd. I don't know if it's a similar sort of dynamic that we sometimes say about Goodison and the homegrown players who come through at Everton. But it was always Iwobi this and Iwobi that. He's got that great goal in the Europa League final, which was one of his last acts at the club. Yeah, so he's obviously got it in his locker. But he said certainly in regards to playing that number 10 role, it doesn't exist, and it's the same for Gylfi Sigurdsson. So it is a case of, in Gylfi's case, either going centre mid or even out wide like he did at the weekend. But then you're going back to Sigurdsson's first season at the club, out of position. I mean, is there a big decision to make over there in the summer? Possibly, but even Iwobi's been at the club, but obviously a less amount a time, but different manager might have different ideas. So I think both of them facing an uncertain future to a certain extent.
It's what we said earlier about Ancelotti needing his own players, so on board. And at the moment, he's having to put square pegs in round holes. He's got a 4-4-2 system that doesn't ideally suit a lot of the players who are at the football club. And so, him and Marcel Brands have, they talk every day, but, they'll have sat down and they will already have identified the kind of players they want, so to change that dynamic. I think, Marcel actually said at the general meeting, didn't he, about a wide right player. So we know the kind of player that they're looking for. Carlo Ancelotti will have his own ideas as well. And so the period we've got between now and the end of the season, apart from trying to nail down a place in Europe, it's also a fact-finding exercise for Carlo Ancelotti, just to learn about the players that he's got, what they're capable of doing. He'll know an awful lot about these players. I mean, sometimes we underestimate, so how extensive managers' knowledge is about players around Europe. But sometimes players do take you by surprise. I'm thinking of when Martinez came on board, and Leon Osman was the player that pleasantly surprised him. He knew about his qualities, but didn't know quite, what he was capable of and what he could do. And, he ended up playing regularly under Martinez because he underestimated what he had. Whether there are players at the club at the moment that Carlo's underestimating, I don't know. No one's actually saying, look, I can do this, I can do that, you're going to have to stick with me. Morgan Schneiderlin's arguably the only one that's actually doing that at the moment, but we've said many, many times that that's his Everton career in a nutshell. He'll do that for 3 or 4 months, then he'll go missing again. So don't be surprised if, he suddenly has a little dip in form again. And I'm actually, sort of taunting him to prove us wrong here. Keep it going for some period of time. But no, it's fact-finding for Carlo. He's basically got a lot of learning to do between now and the end of the season. And then it could be a really intriguing transfer window this summer. I know we're looking way ahead now, but it could be quite exciting seeing the kind of players he brings in, because the players that he wants that will fit his system.
Well, if there's one player he's going to learn a lot about over the next few weeks, it's Andre Gomes.
Yeah.
After 112 days out injured, he made his way back onto the pitch on the hour mark, and instantly I thought he was Everton's man of the match. He hardly looked like he'd missed a beat, did he, Chris?
No, it was just amazing, like you say, just the fact that he was on there. Just, we were all there at Goodison that day, that horrible day when he such a nasty injury, and we basically all thought, well, that's him for the season. Won't be seeing him for a long time. So the fact that he's only actually missed one entire calendar month, because that was start November and the end of February now. So December's two. But yeah, incredible that he's back to, and he like you say, straight back in there, probing passes, up to speed more or less. Obviously, it's going to take him a while to get that sharpness back, but he looked pretty decent, pretty switched on. Like I said, I think Carlo said afterwards that he was, he really improved Everton's display. The team improved with him on the pitch. It wasn't an act of charity. He actually improved the way they were playing and got stuck in as well, picked up a booking as well. So he obviously wasn't afraid to, throw himself about a bit and getting back into the mix. So yeah, and encouraging all round. Just got to hope that gives Everton a significant weapon in the weeks ahead, because we wondered, will it take him quite a few weeks to sort of get back to his best? But it was very encouraging.
I was staggered at how good he was, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, sat in this room last week and basically pleaded with Carlo not to play him, because I'm such a big Andre Gomes fan. I didn't want to take the risk of him, starting the game we were talking about, the intensity of the first hour of a Premier League fixture. And maybe that did go through the thinking, the game gets a bit more stretched for the last half an hour, which is when his range of passing will come to its fore. But he just found the pace of the game so quickly. And that penetrating passing that we've missed was there straight away. Mm-hmm. Quality of passing was good. You just worry a little bit sometimes. The players, when they come back from a lengthy injury absence, are carried through on adrenaline, and so they can perform above a level because of the adrenaline flowing through, and then they have a little bit of a dip again. And so clearly the first couple of games, Andre Gomes is going to be fueled by neat adrenaline, as he was at the weekend. But if you can produce performances like that, he's got to start really against Manchester United now. You can't really, sort of argue for him to be kept on the bench again, because he just looked like he hadn't been away. So, up fair play to him. Did you make him man of the match?
I did make him man of the match.
Did you get flack for it?
No.
No,
absolutely no flack for that. Well, Carlo said he had the conversation with Gomes before the game, and he said he was not so comfortable to start.
Yeah.
That was Gomes not comfortable to start a game. So next week, when presumably he will be much more comfortable to start, as Preno says, he's an absolute chew-in, isn't he? Yeah,
but definitely, if he feels right, definitely. But all I would caution is, after what Dave just said there about the adrenaline and getting through. Remember Seamus Coleman coming back from that awful double leg break.
Leicester performance.
Yeah, he was running. This lung busting run, the length of the pitch in the final minute. It was almost like to show you, I can still do it. And there was a bit of a tailing off a few weeks later. It did sort of plateau a bit. So, yeah, definitely. If Andre's up for it, and you definitely want to be starting with him. Hopefully, another week of training under his belt, and he'll be raring to go.
I suppose it opens up the question again, though. Three of the options to start next to him all played against Arsenal. Tom Davies was the only one who didn't get off the bench. Coming up against Man, I know we'll talk about this bit in more detail later in the week. But at the minute, against Manchester United, who do you think would be the ideal person to start next to Gomes?
At the moment, Morgan Schneiderlin, because he's playing well at the moment. His style complements Andre Gomes is better, but not exactly blessed with options. I mean, Tom Davies, we've not seen that much of him in recent weeks, to be fair. I just think Schneiderlin is performing so well at the moment. He's got to earn the right, to lose his place, basically.
Mm-hmm.
If he has 2 or 3 bad games in succession, well, fair enough, yeah, you'll make that change. It's a difficult one, I could say, because you're never quite sure of how long, Morgan Schneiderlin's good spells are going to last. But we're having one at the moment. And, he can act as that defensive shield, really effectively. He plays that role with reasonable discipline, goes to ground a bit too much for our liking, and there's always a yellow card waiting to happen. But, he does generally, sort of hold his discipline quite well in that position. And when you've got Gomes there, that gives him a little bit more freedom to express himself. Whereas Tom is a little bit more like Andre Gomes, obviously not quite with the same qualities, but, plays a slightly more offensive role. I know he's played a holding role for England under 21s, but, it's a different kettle of fish, I think, playing that role to play in the Premier League. So for the time being, Morgan Schneiderlin, I can't really see anybody else. Gylfi Sigurdsson, who has played central midfield, is not a central midfielder, full stop. So, if he's going to get a place anywhere in the team, it needs to be out wide. When he made his 40-odd million quid, signing and ended up playing left midfield. Okay, he scored a few goals from that area, but, that's the only way he's going to get into the team. That's what I'd think, but, feel free to argue otherwise.
Schneiderlin, of course, was the man replaced by Gomes this weekend, and Delph partnered Gomes in central midfield until he was then replaced in, I think, the 82nd minute, something like that. So, Chris, do you think that maybe gives a little bit of a window into Ancelotti's thinking? Is he looking at Delph and Gomes?
Yeah, but I wonder, there's another dynamic that comes into it, in that he tends to be going with Bernard in the home game. So Gylfi was out wide, as we were saying, at the weekend with Iwobi, and then finished off in the middle after all those substitutions. So, yeah, it might be different again against Man United. Hopefully he can mix it up, because obviously he had 1 foot enforced change at the weekend, but it was 5 changes, wasn't it, from the previous game? And I think it was 4 changes from the game before that. So he's not afraid to mix it up. I mean, he might do something totally different and surprise us all. But yeah, I'd concur with Dave in regards to, I would imagine that the 2 favourites to be in there would possibly be Gomes and Schneiderlin. But at least it's good to have a bit of competition for places now, because it's only a few weeks ago when we were talking about there were very little options in that centre of the park. Now you've got a few different things you can do to mix it up.
The interesting one is what he does with Moise Kean, because we've only seen fleeting glimpses of him under Ancelotti, and I've said before, I'm not massively. I choose my words carefully here.
You're not convinced on him?
No, I'm not convinced. Thank you. He's got raw pace. I struggle sometimes with his ability to hold the ball up. His finishing's a bit erratic. But Carlo Ancelotti wanted to sign him for Napoli, so we obviously saw something there. But the way Calvert-Lewin's performing, the way Richarlison's performing, he's not getting a look in at the moment, and you can't really argue, why he should be getting a look in ahead of those 2. So, is that somebody that we just allow to develop quietly in the background, over the next 2 or 3 months? Is he going to get frustrated at not getting any game time? Again, he's a kid, he's still a young boy who's basically learning how to settle into a new country. So, we can't be too harsh. But I just wonder what Carlo's going to do with him over the next couple of months, whether we're going to see more opportunities for him, or whether they're just going to stick with the 2 who are performing for him at the moment.
Well, I suppose another player who caused quite a bit of conversation at the weekend was Djibril Sidibe. Didn't have his best game in an Everton shirt, it must be said. He looked culpable for a couple of the goals at least. He's got Seamus Coleman running him close for that position. He's obviously only on loan as well. There's a decision to be made in the summer. Bees, what are your thoughts at the minute on Sidibe?
It probably changed a bit. We talked about this in length, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, and we were saying it really was up in the air, this position, in that you could have Coleman as first choice right back next season. Could be Sidibe signed. Could be John Joe Kenny coming back. I don't know if did he play at the weekend, because he got beat 5-0.
I think they did. I think he did. Yeah. But to Leipzig, to be fair, who are playing very well this season. 3 different options there.
Possibly even bringing somebody else in. I'd say as Sidibe as the lone player is possibly the one in the weakest position here, and they might say, okay, you've done all right, and he's done played well at times, even playing further up the field, right mid. He's been an able deputy there, but perhaps as the lone player, they might say, well, thanks, but no thanks, and time to move on. He might have other options himself. I know the likes of Milan have been linked, and he certainly might be able to get a decent option elsewhere, but I'd be inclined to think that Sidibe was the one in the weakest position at the moment. I said it was all coming down that right flank at the weekend. Like I say, a couple of goals. Could point the finger at there. So yeah, he's been up and down, and he's been mostly, he's been an encouraging loan spell, but they perhaps might decide to look elsewhere, whether that's with Seamus and John Joe, or possibly even another option.
You could argue that all three of those players you've suggested might not be the answer for next season. Sidibe and Coleman are almost like absolute opposites of each other. Sidibe, quality delivery in the final third, but defensively, as he showed at the weekend, can be caught napping and caught dozing sometimes. Seamus is a bit more disciplined defensively, but that penetration that we used to see from him 2 or 3 years ago has never been quite there, since his the broken leg. And he's a player who was like, as he turned 30 now, he's reaching, so I wouldn't say the twilight of his career, but he's not going to quite have that same zest that he had early in his career. And then John Joe Kenny, after Helmans, I must say, I've not really seen that much of him since he's been in Germany. But when Everton allowed him to go on loan, he was similar to Sidibe in that respect, in that capable of delivering killer balls from the flanks, but defensively could be caught, napping a couple of times. So that suggests that, that's also a position where we could be looking for, we want real quality. We want, a Lucas Dean type signing, who I know who's not had his greatest season compared to last season, but still being decent enough. So all three have got question marks against them, which means that maybe, so that's an area they'll be looking to bring somebody else in the summer. Of the three, if you're going to push me into a corner at the moment, I'd still stick with Sidibe, because, I like the quality he's got going forward. But you need somebody in front of him who's going to be more defensively disciplined, and we don't really have a right midfielder at the moment. Whoever's playing in that position tends to be a right forward, for want of a better phrase, somebody whose qualities are better offensively than defensively. That's exposing him to a certain degree, and he's getting caught out, as he was at the weekend.
Do you think right back, with all the work that Everton have got to do in the summer, do you think that right back is one of the priority positions to try and find a solution for?
Not priority, but then again, what is a priority? There's so many areas of the team now that, you think you want to see improvements. Central defence, Holgate's taken us all by surprise this season. And, really made a compelling argument, to be first choice alongside Yerry Mina next season and beyond. But, all good sides have 4 quality central defenders. Michael Keane seems to have fallen down the pecking order a wee bit at the moment. So, is there another? I would say yes, we need more cover, more defensive quality in that area. We've already said, publicly, that wide right is an area that they're looking at. And as well as Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison have done, you need more quality in the attacking areas. Moise Kean, I've said, I'm not entirely certain about, so that potential being realised anytime soon. So again, you're looking for, so more quality in that area. And then to complete the full set, wide left, Bernard has done great in home games, but maybe not consistently enough to do it. So yeah, an awful lot of the, squad needs looking at. The one area that doesn't, and people will probably shout me down in flames for it, Jordan Pickford. I'm happy with Jordan Pickford. I know I saw people criticising again. He only had 3 shots on target to face and never saved any of them. People seem to have a down on him at the moment, and they're looking to, sort of pick holes in it, whether that's because he features on Deliveroo adverts or is spotted at darts, so enjoying his downtime. I don't know. It's almost like people, want him to just be living this monastic existence, focusing entirely on his football. And I think he's had a solid enough season. Okay, the mistake, at home, Brighton was it, or Palace, sorry, was a howler, but he's not made many this season, and equally he's saved us an awful lot of points, so with the quality of his saves. He can improve, of course he can, but he's a young footballer, like Richarlison, like Calvert-Lewin, who's improving all the time, and that's one area I don't think we need to be looking in, but, there are other fans out there that have different views, and we're all entitled to our views.
It's a bit of a divisive figure at the minute, isn't he, Bees? But you spoke to Neville Southall quite recently.
Yeah. We mentioned about that, and he said the best way to deal with the critics was to make them eat your words. Don't bite back against them. Just show them with your own performances. Yeah, I thought it was strange that he was getting criticism over those goals. I've said that before on this podcast, similar sort of stance to Dave. Yeah, we can look at the howlers that he has done, but then he wasn't to blame for anything on Sunday, and it's almost like they're just looking for somebody to point the finger of blame. I don't think that. I think it'd be very expensive to replace Jordan Pickford, and I think he's a great asset for the club. It's strange, really, because with him being England #1, he's under so much.
That's where the scrutiny comes
spotlight.
from, yeah.
And then ultimately for England, I don't think he's hardly put a foot wrong for England. The howlers that he has made have been for Everton. Obviously, that's frustrating from an Evertonian's point of view, but I think for his country, he's always done well. But we talk about reshaping the squad for the summer, and a lot of the way how it's going to work is going to be who you can get off the books. And then we've spoken about all these players who are on certain amounts of wages, big money, and that's going to affect what Everton can do. So I think that you don't want to be looking at areas like that. You want to be looking at the areas where there really is a need to change things around. But a lot of that will be shaped by who you can actually get off the books, because we're talking about obviously the right back area again. Those players are all going to be on a decent whack, and it's easier said than done, and just like replacing them. But I think for what he brings to the club, Jordan Pickford, and the money it costs to replace him, I think that's totally ridiculous, and I think it's pretty unfair, the stick that he's been getting.
To be fair, you look at the Premier League, all goalkeepers, so have wobbles. Look at last night. He's not had a performance like Fabianski's had this season. God, that was incredible. Alisson, the first goal, Alisson is allegedly the greatest goalkeeper since Gordon Banks pulled on his shirt. And yet, he made one error and he made one great save, late in the match that, Liverpool the victory in the end. Jordan Pickford's done that. He's made mistakes and then he's made blinding saves straight afterwards. It's all about strength of character, and he has got a strong mental strength. And he needs to listen to Neville's advice there, and maybe not be quite so public, when he's complaining about, Gary Neville having a pop at him or other people having a pop at him. Yeah, take those criticisms on board, but don't publicly, complain about them. Just let your quality of your performances close the critics' mouths. I can't ever remember Neville really having a pop publicly about critics. He went and sat on a goalpost once when he had a bit of a cob on. But so generally, he didn't say too much, and he had a weekly column in the Echo Forwards at the time, and he used to use that to support his teammates rather than have a go back at anybody else. So there's a man with incredible strength of character there. Listen to his advice, and just let your goalkeeping do your talking. But that's not a problem for us at the moment. But plenty of other areas of the squad do need a little bit of attention, which they will get. The Marcel Brands interview that was on Sky earlier in the week I found quite interesting. And I'm quite pleased that he got a bit of profile as well, because since he arrived in like a blaze of publicity, obviously we're aware of the job he does, and and we know so how respected a figure he is here on Merseyside, but the greater football public at large probably doesn't really, know a great deal about, what goes on. He very rarely makes headlines, very rarely quoted in the national newspapers. So it was quite good to see the work that he's doing, getting a wider profile, and Everton getting a wider profile, which is what we want and why we need to be in the Europa League next season.
Certainly very interesting, as ever. Thank you, lads, for joining. We'll be back later in the week to preview what will no doubt be a very important match at Goodison Park, Everton against Manchester United. Don't forget you can rate, review and subscribe to us on all of your podcast platforms, and don't forget you can join us on Facebook as well on the Royal Blue podcast page. Thank you for listening, and see you later in the week.
The Royal Blue podcast from the Liverpool Echo.